Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Best of Three podcast. I'm Alvin, TH. How we doing?
Good, Alvin. Good to see you, man. It has been a crazy week of tennis at the Open.
Yeah,
Man,
yeah,
my sleep is just now catching up, and and I think I've consumed so much tennis. I'm literally about to be in overload mode right now. But the matches are getting better, and the matchups are getting better. I can't wait to talk about Carlos and Novak, and amongst others. But man, uh, what a week and a half.
yeah. It's been strong, and we're getting to that time in the tournament. Like, if you're on site, this is when you stop seeing the big names on the outside courts. All the matches get down to Rod Laver. Things kind of slow down as the intensity picks up. There are fewer people on site now. There are
Right,
more people
right.
watching on TV because this is winning time, right? So we're
Yeah.
as we record this, we are about to start the semis. I think tonight on the U.S. time here, Eastern Standard Time. But before that, you and I had some conversations, right after watching Carlos against Novak, right? And we were talking about how people view these matches, how we view these matches. So I think in part one here, we're going to talk about, from a coach's perspective, how a coach watches a match.
Sure.
And then in part two, we'll start to look at the kind of preview the semifinals real quick and see
Sure.
what we've got left here on the tennis side. But I bring up the idea of coaches watching tennis matches because you are an active coach. I'm a former coach, but the way that we watch tennis matches is probably a little different. I would say I fall into the category of more so watching it as a fan, especially at the highest levels, right? When we're talking about Novak and Yannick and Carlos, like sometimes I can't discern the nuanced differences and what they're trying to do, especially on TV. Obviously, it's a lot easier to watch a tennis match when you're on ground level, right? And it has your full attention. But so I put the question to you because when I watched the match, I thought, man, it just kind of left me wanting a little bit more out of Carlos. It felt a little sloppy after that first set. But then all the feedback I heard was, oh man, what a tactical game of chess that was, almost
Sure.
an exhibition put on by Novak. So what I want to do is kind of get your perspective of how you watch that match and then kind of
Yep.
take me through your process of,
Yep.
how you would normally watch a high level ATP or WTA match.
First of all, appreciate your deferring to me. I don't know if whatever I provide, I hope that it's beneficial to
No,
somebody.
it's going to be value because your
Right.
takes were very different than what I saw. So yeah,
Sure. Number one, and this is for the tennis juniors out there. This is for the tennis parents, perhaps in particular, coaches, perhaps as well. I've been coaching a long time, so I've done it a little bit longer than most. Still learning, by the way. The biggest thing that I think I bring to most matches is objectivity, not subjectivity.
Yeah.
One of the problems you run into as a fan is you are watching the match from one side and only one side. You're watching from your player's ability or inability, in some cases, to get certain things done. There is your side, there's their side, and then there's the truth, right?
Right.
Or, as I like to say, there's the match. The match is really what's in between. Um, some of the viewers, and I know you've heard me say this for years, it's the rock, paper, and scissors concept. And like rock, paper, scissors, when you're doing 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5, it changes, right? You're
Right.
not going to get the same thing. No one leads with rock all 3 times. I mean, at some point they know he always does rock, so therefore, hence paper. But I say it to say objectivity is key. When you watch as a fan, you tend to only see the one side. Number 2, there's matchups. And this is key. There are matchups, but often the matchup is the other because people know about the matchup, right? For example, I am a big serving Ben Shelton, right?
Yep.
He's got a big serve. I remember he played Brandon Nakashima. I think it was first round, second
First round. Yep.
right? Brandon has played Ben a lot of times.
Yep.
Brandon knows he's got a big serve. The matchup was more about could Ben break Brandon? And what would he do tactically once the return got back in play? The match is not about Ben's serve. Ben's got a big serve. You're not going to stop that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we saw that a little bit in the Pesci-Pericard and Monfils match, right?
Right. Yeah.
We know GMP's got a huge serve. Giovanni's got one of the biggest second serves on the tour. So it wasn't about the serve. You saw Monfils go in early and block. You saw him back up and go heavy. You saw him do whatever he could to get the serve back in play. Now, I say that to say, so the matchup was, could GMP break Gale? Right? And that becomes the actual matchup. The other is so strong, you already know. You've already given that. That's almost X'd out because it's so dominant. It's a gift. You're not gonna, and you could say that in any sport, right?
You could go back to like Federer and Nadal, right?
Oh,
the matchup was, could Rafael get his forehand to Rogers' backhand up high, easier on clay? It's pretty straightforward after that.
100%. And so on and so on and so on. And I say that to say that's the matchup. So sometimes the weapons almost dictate you find different ways to get to that. I'd probably say number 3, and this is my personal favorite, who's making the adjustment. You kind of come out of the gate, typically in the first couple of games, guys are getting started, he's kind of figured out, and especially in this Novak Carlos match, it was windy. Neither player played that sharp, to be honest. I agree with your early statement about it looked a little sloppy. It was very sloppy. But it was sloppy on both sides, which lets you know 2 players at that level, the wind was clearly a factor. You saw a couple of weird shanks from Carlos. You saw a couple of weird step-ups from Novak that missed the mark by a long shot. Tons of missed first serves. Those guys don't have huge serves to go for a lot. So to see them miss a lot of first, the wind was messing with those tosses. But Novak made an adjustment. He made several, actually, but the biggest one I thought that he made was he adjusted what balls he was going to give Carlos. And Carlos likes to play through the court. He likes to yank that first hard forehand cross. He likes to yank the next ball a little wider cross. He likes to take your line, right?
Yep.
Nadal used to always love his big cross-court backhand, of course, to most guys' forehands, and then run around, right? He never went inside in first. He always took you inside out and then did that 2 or 3 times until he felt like he had the inside in that he wanted or curled you with the lefty ball off the court, right? You knew it, I knew it, the guy knew it, the guy's coaches knew it, didn't matter. It was coming. You couldn't stop it. But that was his pattern. So, as I look at the matchup or who can make the adjustment in later years, guys started trying to match up more to Nadal's backhand. Shifting gears here back to our Novak Carlos match, I just said to say, because you knew the pattern was so good, you had to find a way to get away from it or not let him engage and get the pattern that he wanted. So, what Novak did to me that was so smart was he first started trying to out-hit Carlos. Carlos has the ability to, when he's moving on his own terms, he covers the court very well.
Yeah.
When you run Carlos, ironically, it's weird, he's not as good of a mover. He reacts more than he proacts. He hits a little bit cross almost all the time, and his depth suffers because he now retreats 2, 3, 5, sometimes 6 feet behind the court.
Would you say
now
he doesn't
opens up the court for the other person?
Would you say he doesn't read all that well?
That's exactly what I would say. I would tell you that he reacts extremely well, and when he gets the ball he wants, he plays what I call combo tennis. The combo to me is the 1-2 punch.
Right.
He hits the ball he wants. He hits the ball that he knows will be the follow-up. And most people, and this is important for juniors to understand, the combo isn't always on your racket. I hit a good ball to you, Alvin, and you counter it, and I think just because I hit my good ball, that my next ball is the bow of the combo, but I didn't hurt you enough with the first ball. So what I think Carlos does that's his genius, he knows, nope, not yet. Nope, not yet. He is patient on the of combo, the first half of it.
Yeah.
And so he will run you, he'll move you, he'll continue to get just the right combo, so to speak, that he's looking for. So what happens is, when he finally takes you live, he's been plotting that ball for 6 shots. Right? Now, bring it back to Novak. Novak never let him get the combo that he wanted in the second set.
Right. Okay. So if we go through this match in a progressive timeline fashion. Well, first before I do that, this is kind of one of the things where we talk about fed ball drills versus live ball drills. In a 5-ball fed ball drill, right? You're going to hit ball, hit ball, hit ball, hit ball, hit ball.
Yeah.
and you know the pattern's coming, so that when you go to a match or a live ball situation, you might pull that inside in ball a little, down the line ball a little too soon because it's not actually the right ball, right? So
Often.
for all those players and coaches out there, right, we're gonna be going more live ball than fed ball here. There's your free tip. But okay, so back to the match. In progression, right? Little ugly start from both players. We get to we're on serve at about 4-all. Novak pulls up lame, right? He gets a little hurt, gets broken. Carlos serves it out, 6-4. We take the break. Novak comes back in the second set post injury timeout.
Yeah.
It's now a slightly different match. Okay, now go on to your point about changing tactics there and not
So
letting
let's
him
go
get
back to that briefly on the end of the first, because the first match was still pretty close. Novak, in my opinion, was winning most of the long points, ironically, but it was a death of 1,000 cuts. He was getting more dinged up going for the longer points.
Yep.
And I felt like, Father Time, as both McEnroe pointed out, was undefeated. He was starting to deplete his reserves a little quicker than Carlos was, because the longer the points went, he expended too much energy to get there. What I felt like, and this is just me, Carlos actually hit the ball quite short in the first set. Novak, wanting to go longer, actually got more dinged up in the longer rallies, even though he won a few. In fact, the very players who he got hurt, his hip on, were long rallies.
Yeah.
He went back behind him a few times. You could tell knee, hip, whatever was hurting him was aggravated while he was getting ran in those longer points. He won the majority of them by my count. So that also played into, I can't keep doing this for 3 to 4 more sets.
Right.
Carlos wins the first set. In my opinion, played a couple of good games. Novak had a couple of very characteristic first serve misses, had a couple of step-up points that he missed. In my opinion, just misfired. He really wasn't playing the wrong way. He was playing Novak at 35, 33. He wasn't playing Novak at 37.
Right.
Carlos then is playing the same kind of game, and Novak said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring the action to you quick. We're going to see if you can hurt me if I pressure you a little bit more. Carlos likes to control the middle of the court. Everybody knows that. Everybody's seen that. The commentators did a good job of explaining that. But that's off of his serve and off of a ball he can move inside the court on. He doesn't do it well when he's neutralized. In fact, some would say his neutral/defensive ball is actually quite mortal. He backs up, he loses court position, he goes with the high buggy forehand, and at that point in time, he starts to, I'm going to say, give ground.
Yeah.
Right? There are 3 big things you have to always consider on a tennis match. You are trying to take away time, you're trying to take away options, you're trying to take away court. I don't care what situation you're dealing with. Time, court, and option. If I can take away your time, I affect your options in your court. If I can take away your court, I take away your time,
your options.
I take your options. And if I take away your options, even though you have court,
you don't have
time to actually work it out and get it done.
Right.
So that's the holy trinity, if you will, and I'm not by any means a believer in the trinity, which is a whole other talk show. I just think you need to understand those 3 pieces always come into play. Novak took his time away, and he went through the biggest part of the court. Carlos backs up, and guess who is on the move now?
Right.
Carlos. Novak went behind him, went in front of him, and when the point got too long, you know what he did? He went back down the middle.
Yep.
He did not keep running. He did not want the death of 1,000 cuts.
So,
he had 4. Go ahead.
Okay, so going back down the middle, so that was the kind of thing I was able to pick up, right? So earlier in the match, in the first set specifically, and then probably in the first half of the second set, we were still playing the space in which above the net that Carlos wants to play in, right? He wants to be in the middle. He wants to go a little higher and dictate out through our outside zones, right? And so Novak brought the height down and started shooting through the middle more, which made it very, very difficult. Carlos then had to pick the ball up in height.
Thank you.
And then and with doing that, it's harder to then go up and out from the middle.
Thank you.
And that's where I felt like Carlos got lost. Okay, here we go.
Let's add in another piece that people don't quite understand that they probably didn't pick up. None of the commentators picked up on this. Carlos is slightly Western in the grip. Not full on, but he's pretty close. There are 2 balls that the big forehand with the almost Western grip hates. Most people know the low ball.
Yep.
Here's another one, and Novak gave him a healthy dose of it. I think it came from Murray. That's just me, but because he hasn't done this ball a lot up until this tournament. He gave Carlos the out wide sitter that pulled him wide enough in the alley. Almost everybody with a straight arm forehand does what, Alvin? They extend.
You try to.
When you extend, what does the face look like on your racket? It's closed.
Closed. Yeah.
And now you've got a ball that's about waist high that you're in front of, and guess what?
God, that's hard to hit
all day long. You just can't help it.
As someone who also hits a semi-Western that's flirting with Pacific time there, it's so hard to hit that ball when you're stretched out. Because like you said, face
have
down.
An Eastern grip, or you'd have the continental grip. Either way. Why did he serve, I would almost like to say, 90% of his balls out wide to Carlos's forehand? Because of that ball. And Carlos never hurt him. In fact, all those multiple games, both add in and add out, Carlos missed the majority of the returns or floated them on that deuce side.
Yeah.
Right? He blew Novak several ad points. And Carlos played great on the ad for that same reason. Because he's playing better on the late ball than he's playing on the early ball. Do you think that that is something that will, as I kind of think through that progression, something that will change on a surface to surface standpoint, right? Because if you're on clay, right, that out wide serve now sits up a little bit more. Carlos has a chance to load that right leg and really get underneath and behind that ball. Yeah. Yep. And it's taggable. And we're on hard court, not so much, and on grass, it skids, right? So you're in a whole different situation. The last piece that I think people don't realize that he did so well, when Carlos did back up, Novak served him volley.
He did.
And out of nowhere, he's now the new Pat Cash. I mean, he came in so many times. I was almost shocked, and got pretty good hands and pretty good drop volleys. One of the commentators said they saw him in warm-up. He was practicing his drop volley to try to run Novak, and he did a couple, but nowhere near to the extent that Novak served volleyed and drop volleyed him to run Carlos. Carlos had a couple easy ones when Novak laid up the droppers pretty bad. But in reality, I felt all these tactics were a way to just keep testing the fences, so to speak, of what Carlos was and was not comfortable doing. So in the third set, I thought was the best set he played. Hats off to the physios. They gave Novak some pretty strong, I'm going to say medicine, whatever that was. But he wasn't even thinking about his hip. He was thinking about his strokes. He was back to arguing with his box. He was back to being salty and being the Novak that we've all come to love, hate, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But he was in form, buddy. And I thought the third set was actually stronger than the fourth. I thought it was the best set of all four sets, because he was back to his own terms, hurting it, taking the step up a little further inside the court, serving well, returning well. And I thought he took the racket out of Alcaraz's hands a bit. The fourth set, I honestly thought Carlos lost a few chances. Was a couple of breaks early that I thought he played. Just played sloppy. Went to the dropper a bit early. Just didn't play smart. Gave him too many early errors and games and fought back. But Novak was still that really sneaky 15-30. You know, when you go back to 15-40, you're down. You play a phenomenal point for 30-40, but you're still down 30-40. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It keeps you in a coffin. You struggle and have this, Herculean effort to get back to deuce. You play a sloppy point at deuce. You're back down at out. I mean, you're just never really seeing daylight. And I thought the pressure of the moment and him not playing his best tennis hurt him a little bit. He also missed a lot of first serves. I thought that Novak just kind of used the pressure of the score in the moment. Of course, he's up 2-1. I thought he did a lot of work to really kind of apply the pressure, so to speak, that overall had the cumulative effect of making Carlos fade a little bit in the fourth.
And like we talked about this, probably in our preview of the tournament, that the profiles of players that tend to someone like a Carlos or someone like an Iga, like they will struggle with a certain type of player, but they've gotten so good that there's only a handful of players that actually fit that profile, right?
100%.
Carlos's kind of kryptonite profile is someone who's generally tall, will serve big, and will also force him back and make the court very long, right?
Right.
So that is not necessarily Novak, except for Novak is a wizard, right? And he's the GOAT. He almost morphed into that player, right?
I use that term a lot, morph. He has ability to morph in between styles to be whatever he needs to be at that certain time. And
Right.
that's exactly what happened. He served like a guy 6'6",
Right. And
6'8",
so like I feel
6'9".
like I've seen that serve and volley tactic work against Carlos, but it was like it came from like Alexander Zverev last year's Australian Open or
Thank you.
Medvedev in last year's
That's
US
right.
Open, right? Make the
Or
court
Sinner,
long. Right.
right?
Make the court long. And maybe Sinner doesn't Sinner doesn't come forward that much, but like if you're making the court long and you're seeing your opponent back up, right? And this is something for players to, younger players or whatever, even adult players to recognize it when you're talking about position again and you're talking about time, your volleys don't have to be great if you come in at the right time on the right ball, right?
Correct.
So if you can push them back and you can
With the
sneak
guy
in,
that's slicing or with the guy that's floating and backing up on the
right,
serve,
right,
and that's the beauty of Novak serve. Very underrated server, by the way. I believe one of the macros, I think it was John mentioned it, it's his biggest shot that he's improved on. I agree 100,000%. In the first 5 years of his career, I felt like his forehand got better.
yeah, yep,
Still had a weak serve. His on the rise started getting unbelievable. I mean, you talk about Pong as your reference. He plays Pong with the best of them.
yep,
But he still wasn't starting off points on his own terms. Got a good kick. He got decent slice. His kick would definitely get to the tee, but it was manageable. You could get around it. He just was uncomfortable at times. Now he can serve anywhere. Has a good degree of pop. He's in the low 130s. He's certainly no Ivo Karlovic or Andy Roddick, but it gets the job done.
right,
And when he hits his targets and makes his first serves, he handles the ball afterwards, dare I say, better than anybody I've seen. So you take a very above average serve with perhaps the best second ball follow-up and read of all time.
right, yeah,
And
yeah,
you've got just an unstoppable combo. That is the definition of a combo, right? Can you put the two shots back to back that take away an opponent's time, court, and options? That's a combo.
and then you add in he's the king of 5-set tennis, right? So like we saw this last year French Open is one example against Cerundolo, right? My man tears his meniscus in the match, still figures out a way to win the thing, right, before withdrawing after. That's last year. But if you go all the way back to 2020, Australian Open final, he's playing against Dominic Thiem.
Right.
And the same situation happened there. I think he wins the first set, loses the second set, gets himself into a weird kind of like had to go off court. The whole process of like, okay, I know that I need to get treatment. Something's hurting. I'm going to need time for these meds to kick in, right? So like your anti-inflammatories or your steroidal type medicines, it take about 20, 30 minutes to kick in, right? So like if you're savvy about it on a tennis court, like 20 or 30 minutes can be, if things are going bad, that can be a set. But if you manage the time well, that can be 2 games, right? And so you're just buying time, right? And he knows what to do more so than anyone else out there. So he just got himself, and he almost kind of stole a set he didn't deserve, right?
100%.
That was all happening in the second set. That's when Carlos needed to shut the door, and he let Novak get
let
through
him back in strong.
He's supposed to go into that third set. Novak's supposed to go into that third set down 2 sets to love, and then needing to do like the Herculean Novak thing. But Carlos let him go into a 2 out of 3 set match at that point. Like, okay.
Let me add 2 things to that. Number
Please do.
1, you're 100% right, and I don't think that Carlos attacked it from that perspective. He didn't realize that he kind of stole the first. He was still kind of getting his legs under him, still dealing with the wind, still with the ball right, which is part age and part of savvy. He's still playing off his own bravado. He's not playing off the tactics and the savvy of the match. The 2 points I want to mention. One is one of my favorite stories that I talk about Novak. Back when Scoville was playing, small note, Australian. Scove played with Novak, Australian doubles in the juniors back in 2004. It was about 2-3 years later. Novak Djokovic is playing Gael Monfils in the first round of the U.S. Open. This is way, way back. Maybe 2004, had to be 2005, maybe 2005, 2006. I'm not. You have to go back and check me on the draw and find the years. Well, Novak gets sick in the match. Conditioning is not what it is now. This savvy Serbian throws up on the court. Alvin, you and I have been in New York a few times. You know some of these ball guys get paid, right?
Yeah.
How many of them do you think grab the towel first to clean up
Right.
puke on the court.
Right.
Not a one. Not a one. While they're arguing with each other, trying to figure out who's going to clean this up, Novak sits back in his chair, puts a towel over his head,
Yep.
and sips water for the next 20 minutes, nursing the time that he has available. I want to say Gale was up 2-1 and won that, or 2-1. They have a long, epic battle, I want to say in the fourth, but by the time this all shakes out, or maybe it was early in the fifth, I'm not sure. I think it was early in the fifth. Mouthpiece is now cold, momentum gone.
Yep.
Novak, I want to say won the fifth 6-1, or it was pretty much a rollover in the
Right.
fifth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Novak comes into the locker room beating his chest. And I quote, because I'm there, "This was not conditioning. This was tactics."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
say to myself, you've got to be kidding. He's savvy enough to know. Don't just throw up and get a medical. Throw up on the court. Let him clean it up and get a medical.
And get a medical. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Alvin, at that point, I realized this dude is savvier than most. And
Well, I mean,
I said that was the first part. Now, you understand that that's how he's approaching a match, and he's done that for 20 years. Alvin, you and I ain't ready. I mean,
right. Exactly.
There are a few that are seeing it the way he sees it. Now, here's the second part of that people need to understand. Carlos is still playing off of his tape. He's still playing like, I can do this. I can make that happen. I have beaten him before. I'm playing with. Dude, we know that already. What difference are you going to make, and what adjustment are you going to make? Carlos is not the best adjuster. So guess what? Once Novak knew that he wasn't going to change, put that feather in the cap of Novak Djokovic as well. And that's the piece that I feel like the young players, they come in there with a little too much bravado, a little too much what they can do in the moment, and they put so much trust, confidence in what they can do, not in the matchup, not in the pressure I'm going to create.
Right.
I have a saying that I say, it's about pressure, it's not put away. But a young player likes to think put aways on their own racket.
Mm-hmm.
Directly, they put pressure on themselves, right? They put pressure on themselves to do the big thing.
Yep.
Instead of letting the situation I put you in put more pressure upon you. So that's what I get at when I say I think Carlos had too much pressure. He had too much put away, not pressure on his brain. Novak, of course, was savage, know what was going on. Don't get me started on him and Center's long medicals and no real. The officials have been a little bit subjective on when they started that playing clock.
Sure, yeah.
Center's match as well as in Novak's match. So I feel like a final should come down to the both of them for abuse in the clock. But let me just put that off to the side. But I feel like they took advantage of what was allowed, and that both of them in that obviously center and against Rune, and again obviously Novak against Carlos, really took advantage of the situation and did not, and kind of let the momentum die a little bit, and really came out. You know, I saw Carlos out there shadowing serves, didn't even talk to his box, is out there bouncing around, not thinking about, okay, wait, let me go check in with JC and find out what's going on. Hey, he's done this before to you, right? What's he doing? You know,
well,
let me kind of get my head on that. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this, and then we'll wrap up after that. But Juan Carlos Ferrero has guided Carlos Alcaraz up to this point, right? Juan Carlos is a one-time Grand Slam champion, right? He got Carlos to, I think, very quickly understand what it means to be a professional and what it means to then perform at the highest level, manage your way through a Grand Slam tournament, so on and so forth. And we see what Carlos is now.
Sure.
Are we getting to the point where the utility of JC Ferrero's knowledge is starting to run out? Is Carlos at some point going to need another voice that will then help him as he moves, past this phase of like, I have all these amazing tools to how am I going to stay at the top for the next 10 years?
You're asking two questions. One is Juan Carlos's voice still potent to Carlos's ear?
Well, like you said, he didn't go back to the corner. Like that seems like a mandatory, you get over here. We're having a conversation about what Novak's doing right now.
Thank you. And that was Carlos's fault, in my opinion. Thought too much about his own cake. Didn't check in with his box. Grunier did the same thing, by the way, when that long break with center.
Okay.
His own fault. He's got a coach there who's coached him since he was 8 years old. Both of them chose not to engage with their coaching staff to get their mind right. That's a youth issue and a lack of maturity.
Okay.
Not a coaching box was not there ready to get them through. Number two, will he need somebody? I'm sure they will add a few pieces. I was actually very impressed that Novak had Andy Murray, of all people, in the box, because you're not only having the people that you trust who've known you and coached you for years, you're bringing in an outside consultant, so to speak, aka former opponent and rival, to bring in a new nuance. What am I missing?
Yeah.
What did you think about when you were playing me that I'm forgetting? Which tells me that coaching never really goes away. And who's doing that? The 37-year-old veteran, 24 slams and counting. He's taking full advantage of all the info, whether he wants to hear it at that time or not, just to make sure he has it if he needs it. And I feel like Carlos, had it and didn't take advantage of it. But I feel like Novak, used it, had it in his box just in case he needed it. That was just the difference of youth versus maturity.
Yeah, and so Carlos has added, a lot of people don't know this guy, Samuel Lopez, who was Pablo Carrera Busta's coach, and has worked with Carlos and team previously. He's now, with the team, for this season at least. But so maybe that helps. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on. But that was fun. So I think what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take a break. We're going to come back in part 2 and, do a formal look ahead at the two, at this 2 matches in each semi for the men's and the women's. So TH we'll take a break here and we'll come back and join the people in part 2.
Even better.